Okay, let her dive in. We're talking about something truly fundamental today, how a baby's brain gets built during pregnancy. It's this incredibly sensitive period starting super early. And it turns out it's not just about genetics. What happens in the mother's world, her environment, her internal state, that all plays a massive role.
It really does. This intrauterine time is foundational. The brain structures forming then set the stage for, well, potentially for life.
Absolutely. So today we're doing a deep dive into some fascinating research that connects these dots. We're looking at a review from PubMed. It's titled Impact of Maternal Environment and Inflammation on Fetal Neurodevelopment.
Mhm.
Our goal here is to really unpack the key insights, what factors matter, and crucially, how do they actually influence that developing brain? What does it all mean?
Well, the first thing the research really hammers home is that fetal brain development isn't just a switch that flips. It's continuous, it's complex, and it starts surprisingly early on. And it's dynamic. It's actually responding to its environment right from the get-go.
Right, which makes total sense then, that things the mother experiences these external stimuli could be major influences. And the review gives quite a list, doesn't it? It's pretty broad.
It is surprisingly broad. The source specifically calls out things like maternal nutrition, obviously key,
Yeah.
but also lifestyle choices, socioeconomic conditions,
Right.
even things like the mother's levels of anxiety and stress, and maybe more surprisingly for some, exposure to air pollution.
Wow, okay, that's a real mix. Nutrition, stress, air quality.
Yeah,
How can such different things all funnel down to impact, the brain? That's where the review zeroes in on the mechanism, right?
exactly. The paper makes a strong case that many of these sort of diverse stressors, they tend to converge. They often act through a couple of really key biological pathways. And the source points specifically to oxidative stress and inflammation as the main culprits, the main mediators here.
Okay, inflammation.
Right.
We sort of get that, like the body's alarm system going off, but maybe too much or for too long.
Precisely. It's a defense response, but chronic inflammation is problematic.
And oxidative stress. What's that in simple terms?
Think of it like biological rust, maybe. It's an imbalance. You have these unstable molecules, free radicals, they're generated normally, but also by environmental hits.
Yeah.
And then you have the body's ability to neutralize them. When the free radicals overwhelm the defenses, that's oxidative stress.
Mm-hmm.
And they can damage cells, crucial components.
Got it. So the source is saying that stressors like, say, poor diet or maybe pollution don't just act alone. They can trigger this maternal inflammation, ramp up the oxidative stress.
Hmm.
And importantly, it says this can also mess with the nutrient supply that actually reaches the baby.
That's exactly the connection the paper draws.
Hmm.
Environmental hits can lead to this maternal inflammatory state, and they can modify nutrient delivery across the placenta. And the review also briefly mentions that epigenetic mechanisms could be involved.
Ah, epigenetics.
Oh.
So how the environment can sort of flick gene switches on or off
Mhm.
without changing the basic DNA code itself.
Yeah, that's the idea. It adds another layer of complexity to how the environment talks to our biology.
Okay, so if you've got higher inflammation, more oxidative stress, maybe altered nutrients, what are the consequences for that developing brain? What does the research say happens?
Well, the paper states pretty clearly that these factors can have significant impacts on brain morphogenesis.
Morphogenesis. That's the actual physical shaping of the brain, right? How it builds its structure.
Exactly. How neurons get to the right place, how circuits connect. And crucially, the review stresses these early impacts aren't necessarily temporary. They can have really long-term effects on neurological outcomes for the child.
Wow. So it can actually alter the trajectory of development. That's huge. And here's something I found really striking. The authors emphasize these risk factors often work together. They're described as synergic and mutually reinforcing.
Yes, that's a really critical point. It
Yeah.
means they don't just add up their effects, they can actually multiply them.
So, like, 1 + 1 = 3 in a bad way.
Sort of, yeah. The source implies that maybe chronic stress could make the body react worse to pollution, inflammation-wise. Or maybe poor nutrition makes it harder to handle the oxidative stress from something else. They can create this sort of negative feedback loop impacting development.
That compounding effect sounds, well, quite serious. Does the source give us any specific examples, like conditions where we clearly see this mechanism at play?
It does. It offers two conditions as kind of paradigms examples. First, fetal growth restriction, where the baby isn't growing as expected in the womb. That's presented as a classic outcome linked to reduced nutrient supply.
Okay, makes sense. Often stemming from these underlying issues we've discussed.
Right. The inflammation, the environmental factors impacting placental function and nutrient flow.
In the second example.
The second one is preterm birth. That's highlighted as a condition really strongly associated with inflammation, and the research makes the link. These conditions, which result from those converging mechanisms, poor nutrients, inflammation, they lead to more free radicals, more oxidative stress right there in the fetal environment.
And the source is quite clear, isn't it, that this spike in oxidative stress is bad news for the baby's developing nervous system.
Yes, very clear. It's seen as a key pathway. It's how that external environmental insult translates into uh, potential neurological impact.
So if we pull all this together, the main takeaway from this review feels incredibly important. It's that a healthy intrauterine environment, one that keeps chronic inflammation and oxidative stress low and ensures good nutrient supply, is just absolutely fundamental for normal fetal brain development.
Absolutely. It really underscores how much that 9-month period matters and how active the maternal environment is in shaping it. And this leads directly to the practical point the authors make. They really stress that healthcare professionals, and really anyone supporting pregnant individuals,
Yeah.
should focus on interventions to prevent or reduce the modifiable risk factors.
Right, those things we mentioned earlier, the things you can actually do something about. Nutrition, managing stress, lifestyle, maybe reducing certain environmental exposures where possible.
Exactly, those modifiable factors. The research really frames this as a call to action. Interventions that target reducing inflammation,
Mm.
improving nutrient delivery. They have real potential to positively influence how that baby's brain develops.
It really drives home that the maternal environment isn't just a backdrop. It's actively shaping things through these biological pathways, inflammation, oxidative stress.
Shaping the very foundation of future neurological function.
It's a truly profound connection they're highlighting. So, thinking about all that, especially those modifiable risk factors, the review focuses on diet, stress, lifestyle, environment, and how they're all tangled up and can amplify each other. Say, what does that make you think about? For the listener, how can we as a society or as individuals best support that healthy pregnancy environment, knowing what we now know about its impact on the next generation's brain health? Something to really ponder.